we continue to examine the fresh approach, and today we are in discussion with the Honorable Winston Jordan, Minister of Finance. Minister, thank you very much for taking some
Thank
time
you.
to talk with us. A lot of things are going on, but specifically, let's talk a little bit about economic activities. There have been reports that there's a slowdown in the economy. In your view, are there statistics to prove this? What are your comments on this particular issue?
Well, I think we did mention in anybody's speech that there was a slowdown, but that this slowdown had started since last year. We did give reasons for why we thought that they slowed down, and it wasn't helped by the political situation that had developed late last year and continued into the first half of this year. And like I said in my budget speech, I think, and I said before, and I think the president had made this point also, when you have political instability or a political situation that is not normal, people do several things. One, they hold back on their investment. You postpone decisions that you would have made. You tend to hold on your money. Some capital flight takes place, and that people trying to get out the money just in case. So you have all of that. And unlike a tap where you can turn on and turn off with ease, when people make those decisions, it takes a while after political stability returns for those economic decisions now to be reversed, so to speak. So there's a gap. And that gap depends on what are people's outlook for the future, right? I can tell you that things appear to be picking up based on some amount of statistical evidence and some amount of anecdotal evidence. Anecdotal in the sense that in speaking to the average man, the street, the taxi driver and so on, they've been telling me, well, things are picking up. They're not saying business good, but they say things better than a month or two before. And I perhaps may attribute that to the fact that the government is now almost 6 months in power, and it shows that it means business. The budget is out. People have been paid their salaries and their back pay, and there's more money that is going to be circulating in the economy between now and, say, December. So I think all in all, we could expect things to be more or less on track as we had envisaged in the budget, and that we hope that talk of slowdown can not necessarily disappear, but could be at the bottom of our lexicon by the time the next budget comes up.
We were wondering, but could the reported slowdown in any way be linked to the enactment of the anti-money laundering legislation, which maybe is providing a more difficult time for persons to pass on proceeds from, let us say, crime or bribery activities into what is deemed the real economy?
Real economy. Well, I couldn't offer a definitive answer in the absence of substantial statistics in that era. But if I were to offer an opinion, I would say it could have some, it could be one of the contributing factors simply because it has always been rumored that our economy really was standing on more or less two legs. The parallel economy, heavily financed by drugs, and remittances. Okay? Remittances, for the first time in recent years, has shown a downward trend. And while in Peru we discussed this, and there have been several reasons why this might have been so, two of which could be that our first generation people who have gone over are more or less being overtaken by the second and perhaps even third generation. Now you know the second and third generation aren't necessarily have that affinity to Guyana as the force who went over. Okay, so if the force is getting smaller, perhaps then it might be a contributing reason why the remittances may tend to be on a decline. Now, I can't say if it's a full decline, but it's only this year I'm saying that remittances aren't at the stage that it was at a while ago. Or it could also be due to the general slowdown in the world economy itself, which is also discussed in Peru, that this is perhaps one of the worst in recent times slowdown. But luckily by the third quarter, they have begun to see signs that there could be a pickup. So there could be a pickup in remittances later on in the year. But as it relates to that dark the dark economy, as they normally call it, parallel economy, dark economy, and so on. Yes, the AML bill could be having some real effect, begin to bite in many ways. In fact, I can tell you, even at the level of the formal economy, we are waging a battle against the withdrawal of correspondent banking to the Caribbean area in general. You know, we normally, our banks here, commercial banks, will do business with banks in the Caribbean and so on. And there is a growing withdrawal of these banks from the Caribbean because of they believe that we don't have the enough the soundness of our system based on the anti-money laundering bill. So they're not kind of like taking chances. They're becoming very risk averse. So one or two banks have already pulled out in one or two countries. And I don't know with the state of play, perhaps I might want to talk to the governor on this one, because he has been actively involved in trying to mount a rearguard action to stave off this withdrawal, because it will have widespread implications for banking and transactions and so on in our economy and our relationship with the rest of the world. All right. So I although I don't have statistics to make a scientific conclusion on this, I would say yes, on the strength of what I'm seeing, that the AML is beginning to have some effect where that's going. Coupled with the fact also that since this government has come in, you have, as you've noticed, there have been increasing evidence of drug busts, so to speak, you know, including one or two high-profile drug busts. So that definitely will then have an overall effect in the economy that supposedly was standing on these two main legs.
Minister, your ministry has its role to play in the elimination of this, what is called the parallel economy, especially in the area of tax evasion. How widespread, if at all, is this, and what are some of the areas and efforts to address this?
Yes. Well, first I want to just pay a compliment to the GRA and their staff for the work that they've done over time. They have consistently surpassed targets that were set. But having said that, there's a lot of work to be done. We believe, and from my, I have a lot of experience in the ministry before, but for my short time I came back, I have been engaging the commissioner and the staff on more than one occasion about the need to tighten enforcement and collection. I had this discussion only 2 days ago, right, in looking at the revenues and so on. And I pointed to a number of areas that I believe that he can pay a greater attention to. Don't want to say which areas to alert anybody, but I believe, and he was in agreement, and therefore is at the moment looking at staff in terms of shifting more staff into those areas, so that perhaps in the next few weeks we will see greater presence of these people in terms of their activities in those areas. But I'm particularly asking to beef up enforcement, right? Enforcement of this people out there, and anti-smuggling activities, because smuggling is still big business in this country. And I rather believe that it's time that revenue agencies have a significant part of their staff in the fields than in the air-conditioned offices. I've said this to him, and I believe that he has got the message where this is concerned. I also feel that traditional evasive categories also need to be, I don't want to call it categories, but the self-employed, right? The number of self-employed there, particularly high-profile self-employed, who are either paying some taxes to evade, to avoid the prying eyes of the commissioner, or paying no taxes at all. We know two of those high-profile categories, and I asked him to pay far more attention than he has done to these categories. We tend to shy away from them. You know, the revenue agents tend to shy. But I told him the long arm of the law needs to take its place, and that everybody should be paying the taxes that they should be paying.
the administration is very firm on stamping out corruption. Minister, if I can zoom in on the customs unit, and let's talk a little bit about smuggling. You mentioned smuggling. What is done at that level to stamp out smuggling?
Well, one of the things, I'll tell two things that we have done. One, we looked at the BAS as it relates to the Borbies area and recognized that BAS had lost any effectiveness, if it had any at the beginning. So we have moved to disband the BAS. And that in any case, it was a kind of duplication with the arm of the GRA. They already had a LEID, law enforcement and investigative division. So we have now moved to strengthen that LEID division, both in terms of training and staff, and to have a major presence in that area. It came to many as no surprise that gold was being smuggled extensively in Guyana. I mean, you don't have to be a wizard to know that if certain amount of fuel is being used, somebody has to be a really rich person to be continuously being in gold, using all that fuel, and then you're still not coming up with anything, you know. So you don't have to be a genius to know, right? There are different ways of determining whether something is being smuggled or not. And I think we knew. We probably didn't know the extent to which the gold was being smuggled. And so I think the GRA, together with other agencies, whether it's the police, whether it's the Ghana Gold Board, whether it's the GGMC, they have to have an interagency committee that will deal definitively with this issue about smuggling, particularly of gold. I can't say smuggling in forestry, but I must say that in forestry there's a significant loss of revenue because it seems as if we do not have the kind of inspectorate to determine whether operators in those sectors are actually felling trees in accordance with the agreement and that they are paying their royalties. I don't want to say people are corrupt and so on, but I do believe that our systems are porous when it comes in particular to us getting a fair reward for the diminution of our natural resource base. And that includes gold and the forestry area.
There seems to be a centered focus by government in terms of inspections and inspectorate. The Ministry of Labor, the Department of Labor rather, is strengthening their inspectorate division. Have you had discussions with the agencies that fall within your remit in terms of strengthening enforcement or inspection, the inspectorate department, just so that we can get the desired outcome of it?
Yes, it has been my mantra from since I joined this job. I started out with GRA. I spoke about the inspectorate division, particularly as related to smuggling and the underpayment of VAT. Yeah, you know, when VAT started out, for example, there was a huge increase in revenue, and then suddenly VAT started tapering off. It's not because only that we have removed more items from VAT, but it's because I believe our revenue agency has been lax in the inspectorate part. There are no, I mean, you've actually seen no GRA officer anywhere as it relates to VAT. As it relates to VAT. You may see a custom officer and recognize them. But that is about it. So I've asked, I'm not saying that they're not doing any work, I'm not saying that they're not doing quality work, but I'm saying absence equals ownership. If the GRA people do not go and do whatever they have to do to collect VAT, the people who are collecting VAT will own it. Right? Secondly, NIS. Now this is a sore area for where I'm concerned. I've had a lot of discussion with the general manager and so on. That is another area where I believe the inspectorate is somewhat lacking. All right? I mean, every time you tell me that an agency has gone bust and they owe 2 years, 3 years of payments to NIS, even though the people would have taken out the money, I say something is wrong with NIS and something is wrong with the inspectorate division. So the last time I was there, even though I created a store in relation to their Friday dress, I indicated to them why would NIS wait? If this month a company does not send in their sheets with their check, but last month they did, are you going to wait to find out? Or are you going to go to this company and say, listen, what is going on here? I don't see your check. And the company is still in business. NIS cannot operate like a post office,
Sure.
where you merely, things come, you enter it in a book, and that's it. I'm not knocking NIS, but I'm saying there's a lot more that can be done in a proactive sense to enforce the law, the regulations, right, and getting things like your presence felt in these areas. You don't wait until this thing turned to a cancerous sore, in which case it cannot be treated with Advil or one of these things. You have to excise the whole thing. And this is unfortunate what I see in a number of our revenue agencies. There's this lack of aggression in collecting what the law requires them to collect. And everybody has this kind of laid back approach to the collection of our revenues. Or they have a target, and if they reach the target, they say, well, here, it's time to celebrate. Well, of course, they have a number of issues, the way how those targets are being set, right? And, the way they're being set, they could be set at low so that you can get, and so on. So I'm not saying that is what happened, but I know a thing or two about stats and about setting targets. So I talked to them. I even talked to my stats department, my statistical bureau. Mm-hmm. There again, I have some issues there. Okay, they under their law, they have a law where if companies and businesses don't report, they can enforce the law in terms of fines, daily fines, and so on. I know of no occasion where this chief statistician has enforced this part of the law. There's a time after when moral suasion is of no use and you have to apply the law. And there seems to be a reticence in applying laws that these heads of agencies have and that they can use as a particular weapon in getting compliance. So I'm after them. I think they are going to bear the brunt of my voice and if they don't accede to what I'm trying to tell them to do. So yeah, we are working trying to enforce it.
Do you think that the lack of, as you described, with regard not collecting or allowing a company to lapse 1-2 months, there have been allegations of corruption by officers at NIS and GRA in particular. I am sure you would have spoken about this at your visit to both of the agencies. What is your take? What is your take on this?
Well, as I said, they all remain allegations, and one doesn't want to get into slander or so on, and unless there's proof, they will all remain allegations. But in many instances, these allegations will not go away, and so I think it is upon both agencies and all the other agencies where the allegations are made to ensure, all right, through their internal systems, that such is not happening, and that if it is happening and individuals are caught, they are dealt with condignly in accordance with the law and due process. All right, so that is what I will say where, as it relates. There are indeed some corrupt staff, but I think for the bulk of the staff are hardworking, and they would like to see their organization perform in a way that they can be made proud, or be made proud in the eyes of those who are the thing. But they're one or two bad apples and rotten eggs. Yes, they are, but for the most part, I think organizations are well put together.
Minister, if we can shift our focus now to the issue of the salary increases for ministers, which is generating a lot of
that hot button topic, right?
Yes. Particularly, what was the driving factor for this increase at this time?
Well, I know I said before, and I'm going to repeat exactly what I said before. There were 3 reasons why the salary increase was done. The first reason is that, and not necessarily in any order, I'm just giving you 3 reasons. So not reason number 1 or priority number 1. But there was an anomalous salary situation that we inherited from the previous government. I want you to take a careful look at what I'm going to say. As I said in the same manner before, we inherited a president who was getting a salary in excess of $2 million, tax-free. If you were to gross up, you know what I mean by gross up? You move from a taxable salary to a gross salary. That will be in the region of like about $3-point-something million. So keep that figure in mind, about 3-point-something. We then inherited a prime minister. This is what Sam Hines was getting, of in excess of 1.55 million, except his salary was taxable. So you have 3 million taxable, 1.55 million taxable. We also inherited an attorney general whose salary is tied to the chancellor's salary. And the attorney general's salary, is also non-taxable. So if you were to gross up 1.6 million, you will roughly get about, let's say about 2.3. Just for argument, around 2.2, 2.3 million. So the first three officers in the government, which are the top three, because in any government, when the president is named, he names, even before he names his prime minister, he names the attorney general. Right. Good, and then the prime minister. So those are your top three officers. So the top three officers are earning salaries in excess, gross salaries, in excess of $1.5 million. Your next three officers, who are the vice presidents, senior ministers, junior ministers, they are earning, well, they didn't have a vice president under the last government, but it really doesn't matter at this stage. All three of these officers were being paid $579,000. So you have 3 million, 2.3 million and 1.5 million gross salaries for the top three officers. Your next three officers were paid the same salary, $579,000.
No sort of parity there.
So the first thing was to try to correct what is clearly an anomalous situation. The second reason that the salaries were done is because you have these giant ministries now. These giant ministries. You have Ministry of Communities that got all kinds of things. You have Ministry of the Presidency that got in all the different smaller ministries that are the natural resources, public management, and so on and so forth.
With more responsibility.
Yes. Oh, way more responsibility. I mean, you're running a giant ministry like Ministry of Public Infrastructure. Communities got in housing and water and local government and, you know. So that is the thing. And the third reason was to give some space, right? There was no vice president before. So obviously the vice president had to get a salary. Yes. In the meanwhile, he was being paid the same. They're all he, right? Yeah, they're all. Were being paid the same salary as the senior minister. And the same salary as the junior minister. So all of us were bunched there. Vice president, senior minister, junior minister. We were all bunched at 579. Right? So the third reason is to move, space us out. Yeah, I mean, there's no human resource or any other discipline that you may study that will tell you that is the situation that you will grow an organization. So that is why it was done, and it was at the same time it was done. It was to recognize both the seniority and both the workload. Right? So, because technically a vice president is a senior minister who's higher in the pecking order. Right? It's the senior minister who's higher in the pecking order. And the senior minister is responsible for the entire ministry. But he or she may be assisted either by a junior minister or no minister. Okay? So, and that is why you see the gap between the senior minister and the junior minister. So, it is not something that was, plucked out of the air. We want bigger salaries, we want fat salaries, and so on. There was a systematic, and by the way, this thing didn't just come up like this. This matter, as you well know, first came up around August. The president, unlike what Mr. Ram might be saying now, or as recommended, that is not Mr. Ram's original idea. It is the president who very early, I think in July or something, talked about the establishment of a salaries review commission for constitutional office holders and members of the members of parliament. Way back then he talked about it, about establishing such. And also, we had 2 reports on the salaries of the ministers. One done by an independent evaluator, a consultant. Her evaluation by doing all our different things is a well-experienced human resource person. Hers put us close to the salaries that we had intended to implement in August, that caused all the problems and so on, and that had to be pulled back. Not her actual recommendations, which were higher than what we were trying to do in August, which were still very outrageous, as they said. Okay, as a one shot. So we went back to the drawing board, looked at it again, okay, and came up with something that we thought in the circumstances would be reasonable, considering what both evaluation had recommended salaries well in excess of $1 million, to recognize the same thing about parity. If we can bring down the president and the prime minister and the attorney general's salary to something that that will fit into the 500 something thousand that the senior ministers and the vice president, everybody will get in, what will we be able to do? So I know the next question will be, is this the end of the salary increase?
Yes,
right?
it is actually. If this is a one-off increase for the ministers.
Well, look, I couldn't say that this is a one-off increase simply because then I would, what you mean one-off increase over the next 5 years? Or
For
one,
the
or it's the one-off increase for this year, yes. I mean, I assume that with the establishment of the Salaries Review Commission that the President has intimated will be established for the constitutional agencies and the members of Parliament, and I think he said special office holders, something like that.
Yes.
So special office holders, that prior to that commission being established and report on the future of the salaries, our salaries, future salary increase probably will be linked to whatever is given at the level of the public servants.
But that would have been leading into my next question. In terms of the revision of salaries for ministers, how does this fit into the work of the now Public Service Commission of Inquiry and that overall examination of salary for public servants?
Oh, it doesn't. It doesn't at all. It doesn't at all. They're two different. They're two different things. The work of the, let me say also, the work of the Commissioner of Inquiry. One has to be very careful. They're looking into the conditions of the public service, and conditions may include salary. Okay, I don't know that they can make a recommendation at the end of the day about salaries. They may say something that is qualitative about salaries, but for that commission to make a quantitative recommendation about salary, I'm sure it will breed a lot of comment, simply because such a work requires substantial job evaluation.
Individually.
You have to look at the different jobs, the qualifications required, the experience required, and so on. You just couldn't say Mr. X is earning $10 a day, for they should earn $500. And I don't know that this commission of inquiry has been set up to do a job evaluation exercise that will be required if you wanted to move salaries in any substantive manner. The commission of inquiry could only address issues as they see fit. You know, I mean, on what basis, for example, a permanent secretary turn up to the commission inquiry and saying, for example, you know, scholarship should be like this, people should be employed not on contract but this, and how could that be? How could that translate at the end of the day into a quantitative assessment of salary? I'm saying it could do a qualitative, because if I turn up there and I say, listen, I should be paid more, right? And I believe I should be paid more. You ask me why? I say, well, I work very hard. You know, the work says 8 to 4, but I'm working 8 to 10, 8 to 12, and you know, we're not getting overtime, and we're not getting compensation, and so on. I don't want to trivialize this thing, but I'm trying to show you the seriousness of the work that has to be done before we could even make. And then when you do that, you still have the unions to contend with in the collective bargaining sense. You couldn't just say, I mean, like how we run ourselves in a bit of a trouble, right? The union said, well, that's fine and thing, you give 26 at the bottom and so on, that's fine. But we're treating that only as an interim because you didn't consult with us and we didn't conclude any collective bargaining. So there you go. So it's not an easy road ahead, as I think, I hate to throw cold water on what people may feel is, well, we wait until this commission of inquiry finish and then it's our thing. I hate to throw cold water. I want to feel, if I understand how job evaluation, because I was involved in one, I was involved with the Peak Marwick work back in the early 90s and so on. It's a very extensive work that needs to be done if you really want to think. And you had other issues involved, human resource development, IT, the whole issue about the size of the public service and so on. You know, so all those things. I mean, you bring in a lot of you're computerizing and so on, but you're computerizing and perhaps you have the same staff. They haven't been retrained. They haven't been moved to other areas because the computer might have, you know, displaced them and so on. You know, the number of issues that, and I believe a whole public sector modernization, which has not really been done in any substantial manner, except for the one in 1991, 92 with the Peak Marwick, when they collapsed the different agencies from 20-something to, I think, 10 or 11 and so on. I think another work like that needs to be done over a 2-year period or so on, that will look at what is the size of government, what do we have in terms of skills, equipment, IT, and so on. How does IT make the productivity of the worker better? Because if productivity increase, workers can demand far more wages. So I don't see the two. And by the way, less people don't understand, ministers are self-employed people. Okay? They are self-employed. They're treated as self-employed people. We pay all our NIS, for example. No employer pays NIS because we don't have an employer, technically. So we're treated as self-employed people.
Interesting. But Minister, with regard the salary increases, there has been quite a lot of talks about the timing.
Timing.
How do you respond?
I respond like how I respond before. I ask a friend of mine, he says, man, well, it's okay if you are getting salary, but the timing. I said, okay, what time you have in mind? He said, man, you could wait for January and you announce it in the budget. I said, okay, that's about 2 months away from now. I said, would it have made a difference? He thought, he said, well, I don't know. And he finished at that. Every time I hear the word timing, I ask, well, what is the time? What is the time? What will be the right time? Next year, mid-year, the last year of your term, which one will be the time? Nobody can tell you. All they said is timing. Well, my thing, I keep asking the question, I said right back to you, what is the appropriate time? Somebody, I see a big former university lecturer and former member of the previous government for many years, suggesting that they didn't have the time to be assessed yet. And I'm going to say again, I know of no place in the world where ministers are assessed for the purpose of salary. No place. No place. This is not a case of being given an increment where you're given an appraisal and therefore you get. You know where your assessment of the ministers come? Whether you are voted in or out in the next election. Performance. Not on the basis of salary. If Mr. Obama doesn't perform tomorrow, the salary review commission will review his salary And if they determine that on the strength of the criteria that they have in there, inflation, this, that, and so on, compensation, he has to get a 2% increase, he will get 2% increase. So I say these things, they're not flippant, they are straightforward facts. There's no assessment to determine whether a minister must get, or we should get a 50% increase, a 10% or 5%. Our assessment comes when we are voted in or out at the end of our 5 years. And we are here to work as hard as possible to give people exactly what we say, the good life. Let us concentrate on getting the good life for all. Good life for all. We have made significant inroads into making that. Look around Georgetown. Look around Georgetown and see what is happening. It is happening. Look at some of the work that we have already done against the odds of trying to find out who, where, what is hidden where, all this problems that we inherited that we are trying to fix. There are a number of people in a number of areas that are smiling free and easy the other day. They asked the individual about the salary. He said, listen, I'm not worried about the salary. I get water the first time in 90-something years. Aren't these success stories? I think, by the way, I want to say very clearly, I am happy for what we have seen here. People have had an opportunity to vent their feeling, to keep the government on its toes. This is democracy at work. All right? I will never want anything to be a yes. This keeps you on the toes. You know where you stand with your people. You know what you have to do. And this is motivation for us to work harder to ensure that the people get the good life.
Coming to the good life, and I'm going to refer to your budget presentation in Parliament in August. You talked about bringing the good life to the people. If I may take you a little bit into budget 2016, what are some of the plans and the initiatives? You don't have to give us everything.
Well, I'm not going to give you anything.
In terms of easing the burden, and for that, bringing down the standard, improving the standard of living for the ordinary.
Next year will be the first full year of our budget, because this was a truncated year. We have a number of priority areas. Education is going to be a priority. Primary health care is going to be a priority. We're going to spend somewhat on business and improving business. Infrastructure. A large chunk of our budget will go on infrastructure. Communities and local government. Housing, we want to bring housing, not just giving people house lot. So we are working on trying to get funding, whether grant or loan, to put in what back in the days would be called sites and services, which is putting in the water, the roads, and and so on. The old, I don't know if you're probably not old enough, but back in the day when the previous government built housing schemes, they built housing schemes. They didn't give you a piece of land somewhere behind heaven knows and bush and all kind of thing. They gave you a thing even with telephone was involved, electricity, water. Some of those decayed after a while. But I'm talking at the time when you got them, you got a community. And that is why the president was moved to rename this ministry communities, because he sees it with the library, with the playground, schools, the facilities and so on. So that is what we're talking about being a good life. All right, the good life can't be a piece of a piece of land with busy grass on it, without the infrastructure, and then hope at the end of the day that somebody will come in. And you have several of those schemes that were built, where you have nice houses, but no facilities. Sure. The people have done their part, they've built the house, they've built up the land, and so on, but you have no drainage, and electricity has not been run there, there's no water, and so on. I suppose it's better living in something than nothing, essentially. But we want to move beyond that, give people a sense of a community, really. It's going to take a lot of money, right? But the vision is there.
Can we see maybe an increase in the threshold if I'm not going too far?
I haven't gone so far yet in the budget. Okay. I'm right now looking at the priorities and looking what potentially we can get in terms of revenues next year, both external and internal revenues. I can tell you this much though, from what I've seen, the expenditure requests are triple, quadruple what I've seen for this budget here. So I don't see the revenue profile being that as yet. Perhaps to meet that kind of expenditure, I have to wait until the oil starts flowing.
And I guess that your decision in terms the value-added tax, whether you're going to add more items to the list or even bring down that percentage, would be dependent on the work of the tax reform committee?
Yes, the tax reform committee is in full swing. I am to meet them, I think, preliminarily next week to assess where their work is at the moment. I understand they're making reasonable progress. I've asked them to speed up because I want to have a budget where I can implement some of what they are recommending there, and for me to do that, I have to pass it through the cabinet. We have to discuss it, and so on. So I need some lead-in time. On that though, I want to say that we have to be careful not to weaken VAT to such a state that it becomes a tax that's not worth it, really. So I think we need to attack VAT in future more on broadening the base and bringing down the rate, as opposed to weakening the base, because what we have done over the last couple of years, weakening the base by taking more and more items off of it. And I have 3 letters there right now where people have said to me they've gone into places and the price, for example, of flour, rather than going down, has gone up. But I see no reason why that should happen. But I tell people sometimes, you get fooled by optics. If you were to buy a bottle of rum, maybe downtown in some places, sometimes it ends up being cheaper than buying it at the duty-free shop.
True.
Because you know what people do? They will appropriate the tax that is exempt on the liquor, because they will claim they have higher rent to pay at the airport, electricity, staff, and all these things. They have every reason why they can't pass the tax on to you. So very often we tell people this: don't ask for more, don't ask for more relief by way of zero rating these things. What perhaps can be better done is to target those, have the rate stay there, and target those who are vulnerable groups with direct money subsidy, like maybe the increase in the pension, vouchers or whatever. But when you remove taxes on all these different items and so on, you think the average poor person can buy those items? Even as much as there's clamor for it, you think the average person can? How many loaves of bread can the average person buy per week? So where does he or she benefit from us removing tax on bread or so on and so forth? That's why I'm saying I much prefer a targeted direct subsidy to an individual than this blanket overall removal of taxes, VAT, from a whole set of items. People call them poor people foods, but poor people generally sometimes don't meet anywhere near. And once you start that cycle, it keeps like a snowball. Well, you did it for X sector, why not my sector? You're doing this for X sector, why not my sector? If everybody pays and then you target the subsidy to those who really need the subsidy, right? At the end of the day, too, it's better people get better pensions and better incomes than subsidy. Okay? Because subsidies have a way of distorting, right? Of distorting the economy and so on.
Minister, if I may, finally, on the overall preparations of Budget 2016, are you having consultations with the various stakeholders? How is that coming along?
Well, not yet. Well, not yet in the full flow. I am meeting people, not as part of budget consultation, but I will treat them as budget consultation, because if I meet you now and we discuss and so on, I don't really want, I don't think there's much more that you can think. But yes, I have a range of people. Some newer groups have asked to see me, and I've included them. The differently able have asked to see me, and I've asked my people to make certain that they're invited and so on. So I'll start that process in another couple of weeks. Right now I'm trying to make an assessment of what we're looking like for next year, a preliminary assessment of what we're looking like for next year, even as I try to figure out where we will end up this year. I must tell people that the half-year report is out. It's with the National Assembly. It will be introduced in the National Assembly on Thursday of next week. It doesn't have to be debated, so I'll personally give you a copy, and you can have you can disclose the contents of it, because I think we have uploaded it on our website. If we haven't, then I think it will be there shortly.
So is there anything else you want to add before we close?
Yes, I would only add on the salary aspect that I respect the views of everyone, including those who are making comments, who, if you do a little bit of background work, you will find that they don't have clean hands. But let all ideas contend. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.